February 23rd, 1945, 1,420 hours. Outskirts of Kustrin, Eastern Front. Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann pressed his body against the frozen rubble of what had been a bakery. Through the shattered wall, he could see it. A Soviet T-34 grinding forward through the snow, its 76mm gun sweeping left and right, searching. His hands trembled, not from fear, from the cold, and from what he was about to do. The weapon across his shoulder weighed 11 kilograms, nearly 5 feet long. A simple steel tube with a trigger mechanism and a crude wooden shoulder stock. The Raketenpanzer 54. His squad called it the Panzerschreck, tank terror. The Soviets had another name for it, the Widowmaker. Hartmann knew why. He'd watched Feldwebel Müller fire one 3 days earlier. The backblast had been catastrophic. A cone of flame and gas erupting backward at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Müller had positioned himself too close to the wall. The blast reflected, engulfed him. They found him still clutching the tube, uniform burned into his skin, face unrecognizable. The T-34 was 40 meters away now, close enough. Hartmann stepped into the open, raised the tube to his shoulder, and squeezed the trigger. The desperate innovation. Germany's tank problem began in 1941, the moment Operation Barbarossa ground forward into Soviet territory and encountered the T-34 for the first time. German infantry watched in helpless rage as their standard anti-tank rifles, the Panzerschreck 39, bounced rounds harmlessly off Soviet armor. The 7.92mm tungsten core bullets that could penetrate lighter tanks were useless against the T-34's sloped plates. Wehrmacht doctrine had always relied on artillery and dedicated anti-tank guns to stop enemy armor. But on the vast Eastern Front, those weapons couldn't be everywhere. Infantry needed something portable, something devastating, something that could be carried by a single soldier and fired from the shoulder. The Americans had already developed a solution. In November 1942, US forces landed in North Africa, carrying a weapon called the bazooka, a simple tube that fired a rocket-propelled shaped charge. German forces captured several examples at Kasserine Pass in February 1943. Wehrmacht engineers examined them with intense interest. Within months, German ordnance factories were producing their own version, not a copy, but an improvement. Larger warhead, more powerful propellant, greater penetration. The RPZB-54 was born, the physics of destruction. The Panzerschreck's ammunition was brutally simple and devastatingly effective, a rocket-propelled grenade with a shaped charge warhead containing 660 grams of high explosive. When the warhead struck armor, the hollow cone focused the blast into a superheated jet of metal and gas, traveling at 25,000 feet per second. This jet, the Monroe effect, discovered decades earlier, but only now weaponized, could punch through 160 millimeters of steel plate. No Soviet tank could withstand it. The T-34's frontal armor was 45 millimeters. The heavy IS-2's thickest point was 120 millimeters. The Panzerschreck could penetrate both at ranges up to 150 meters. In the chaos of urban combat or forested terrain, German infantry suddenly had the power to stop Soviet armor advances cold. Between 1943 and 1945, German forces manufactured over 289,000 Panzerschreck launchers. Conservative estimates suggest they destroyed at least 4,000 Soviet tanks. Some historians place the number higher, closer to 6,000. In the desperate final year of the war, as Germany bled territory and men, the Panzerschreck became the Wehrmacht's most reliable anti-armor weapon. But it came at a terrible price. The backblast problem. The rocket motor that propelled the warhead forward also expelled exhaust backward. Physics demanded it, Newton's third law. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. In the bazooka, this backblast was manageable, hot, certainly, but brief and relatively contained. The Panzerschreck's more powerful rocket created something far more dangerous, a cone of flame extending 6 meters behind the operator, surface temperature exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, enough heat to ignite clothing, sear exposed skin, set wooden structures ablaze. Early models lacked any protection for the operator. Soldiers firing the weapon had to ensure absolutely nothing. No walls, no trees, no vehicles stood within 6 meters of the tube's rear. In combat conditions, under fire, with enemy tanks advancing, this requirement was often impossible to meet. The results were predictable and horrifying. German field reports from late 1943 document dozens of cases of operators suffering severe burns. Some died from their injuries before reaching field hospitals. Others survived with permanent disfigurement. The weapon designed to save infantry from tanks was incinerating its own users. Wehrmacht ordnance officials responded by adding a blast shield to the launcher, a simple curved metal plate, protecting the operator's face and upper body. The RPZB-54/1, introduced in early 1944, included this shield as standard equipment. It helped, burns decreased. But they didn't stop. The shield protected the face, it didn't protect the hands. It couldn't prevent the heat wave that washed over the operator's entire body, and it did nothing for soldiers who, in the confusion of battle, positioned themselves incorrectly or fired in enclosed spaces. The tactical nightmare. Using the Panzerschreck effectively required not just courage, but perfect conditions. The operator needed clear line of sight to the target. He needed stable footing to manage the weapon's weight and recoil. He needed his loader. The weapon required a 2-man team to be ready with the next round. He needed to ensure the 6-meter danger zone behind him was clear. He needed to expose himself long enough to aim and fire, and he needed to do all of this while enemy infantry and machine guns were trying to kill him. Soviet tank doctrine evolved specifically to counter German anti-tank teams. T-34s began advancing with infantry support, machine gunners scanning for Panzerschreck operators. The moment a soldier raised the distinctive tube to his shoulder, he became the priority target. Soviet tankers learned to fire high explosive rounds at suspected launcher positions, preemptively. The Panzerschreck's effective range of 150 meters meant operators had to get dangerously close. At that distance, a T-34's machine guns could shred a position in seconds. German soldiers learned to fire from buildings, from behind rubble, from hasty foxholes, anywhere offering cover. But buildings reflected the backblast, rubble limited movement, foxholes became ovens. The kill-to-casualty ratio was appalling. For every Soviet tank destroyed, German forces lost an average of 2 Panzerschreck operators, killed not by enemy fire, but by their own weapons, backblast, or by the concentrated response their firing position provoked. The final evolution. By late 1944, German ordnance engineers had developed a solution, the Panzerfaust. Unlike the Panzerschreck, the Panzerfaust was single-use, disposable, and crucially, recoilless. Its propellant design vented gas through carefully designed ports, eliminating the dangerous backblast. Soldiers could fire from enclosed spaces without risk of immolation. The weapon was lighter, simpler, and required less training. Most importantly, it was cheaper and faster to produce. Germany, by this point in the war, was running out of everything: steel, skilled labor, time. The Panzerschreck required machining and assembly. The Panzerfaust could be stamped and welded by semi-skilled workers in hours. production shifted dramatically. By March 1945, German factories were producing 1.2 million Panzerfaust launchers per month, while Panzerschreck production wound down. The Panzerschreck wasn't officially banned. It was simply obsoleted by a better design, but the effect was the same. By April 1945, most Wehrmacht units had transitioned entirely to the Panzerfaust. The Widowmaker was retired. The legacy. Klaus Hartmann's shot on February 23, 1945, hit the T-34 just below its turret ring. The shaped charge punched through the armor, detonated the ammunition storage, and blew the turret 15 meters into the air. The tank burned. Hartmann survived. The backblast washed over him. He'd positioned himself correctly, shield up, rear clearance verified, and scorched the back of his uniform. Minor burns on his hands, nothing serious. He'd been lucky. Thousands of other Panzerschreck operators weren't. After the war, Allied intelligence teams studied German anti-tank tactics extensively. The Panzerschreck's effectiveness impressed them. Its casualty rate horrified them. American and British weapons designers took detailed notes. The next generation of anti-tank weapons, the M20 Super Bazooka, the British Piat's successors, incorporated lessons learned from both the Panzerschreck's successes and its deadly flaws. Modern shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons still use shaped charge warheads. They still follow the basic principle the Panzerschreck pioneered: portable, infantry-operated firepower capable of destroying main battle tanks. But they incorporate sophisticated, recoilless designs, electronic firing systems, and comprehensive safety features. The backblast problem, the issue that made Panzerschreck the Widowmaker, has been engineered away. Weapons like the American Javelin, the Swedish AT-4, the Russian RPG-7, they can be fired safely from enclosed spaces with minimal danger to the operator. But in the desperate years of 1943 to 1945, on the frozen steppes of the Eastern Front and in the rubble of German cities, soldiers had no such luxury. They had the Panzerschreck, a weapon that could stop a tank, a weapon that might kill them in the process. They used it anyway, because the alternative, watching enemy armor roll forward unopposed, was worse. 4,000 Soviet tanks destroyed, thousands of German soldiers burned. The mathematics of total war, calculated in steel and flesh and fire. The Widowmaker earned its name.